The year is 1989, and after a couple years of Nintendo totally dominating the gaming market, there's finally some new life being breathed into computer games, arcades, and Nintendo's biggest competitor at the time, Sega, as they released the Sega Genesis in the United States. But Nintendo has their own response by releasing their first handheld console, the Game Boy. During this year, we saw some incredible games on all of these platforms, and here are the 5 best. First off is Castlevania III. Now let's be honest for a second, Castlevania II Simon's Quest was terrible. It was part of Konami's attempt to try and take the original game and make something that was going to last a lot longer, and the way they did that was by giving you a lot of unclear directions about what exactly you're supposed to do and force you to grind out killing enemies non-stop in a very non-linear and honestly not very fun game. And thankfully, Konami realized their mistake and fixed that by going back to their roots with Castlevania III and found a better way to increase the game's playtime: replayability. Now, while at first this game might look like a carbon copy of the original game but with new levels, there's 2 very important additions they made to Castlevania III. First off, branching levels. In between certain levels, you'll be able to choose where you go next, which allows you to complete the game in different orders. You can play through the whole game and still have levels that you haven't played through, giving you a reason to play it all over again. And second off, the game added sidekick characters. Depending on which routes you choose to take through the game, you'll get one of 3 different sidekicks who offer new mechanics that handle differently from the main character Trevor Belmont, giving you abilities like climbing walls, using magic, or even being able to turn into a bat for a limited period of time and fly around the screen. It was one of the first games to really give you a reason to want to play it over and over again, for a reason outside of the fact that it's just that fun, which, by the way, this game is still really freaking fun, but you're going to want to play it over again to see how all the different paths play out. Second off, let's take a look at some of the computer games that came out this year, starting with Prince of Persia. Now, Prince of Persia is a game where you have to rescue a princess within an hour. Literally, the game times you for an hour to try and save her. And one of the most engaging things about this game right away is just how visually stunning it was for its time. Most games back then had very simple character sprites where you just see their legs move left, right, and maybe they strike a pose when they jump. In this one, you have full, interesting looking fluid body motion, including how you run, how you jump, how it looks differently between a regular jump and a running jump, and how you climb up the side of things, creating a cinematic style that no other game of its time really had, which was especially important in the game's sword fights, which created a visually striking form of combat that no other games had. What was also important was that this game differentiated itself from most other platformers of the time. Most platformers were very fast-paced and simple games of just don't fall down pits or quickly get through the level. In this though, there are traps, there are switches you have to be careful not to step on, so you actually have to take your time figuring out where is safe to walk and where is not, while still having to deal with the game's time limit, which is forcing you to rush things, giving players the need to have to restart over and over again as they learn the nuances of each game's level and complete them as quickly as they can. The combination of this game's new take on the platforming genre and its focus on cinematics was revolutionary for its time. Now, during 1989, there was another revolutionary PC game that came out, but for very different reasons, and that's SimCity. Now, for a long time, games were mostly focused on trying to recreate things that people found to be fun in regular life, trying to recreate sports, recreate fighting games, things you would see in movies, or just puzzles or breathing new life into old school games that were originally pen and paper. What SimCity chose to do instead was create a game that was focused on resource management, timing and planning, and watching a city that you build grow over time, which ended up being way more entertaining than anyone would have thought before this game was released. It won all kinds of awards for its time and started an entire new genre of games, and I'm not even talking about simulation-style games. It started the sandbox in the first place. All games up until that point had an objective, they had a purpose, get to the end of the level, do this, collect this many items, whereas SimCity was just, here's a bunch of tools, do what you want and see where it leads, whether that's building the largest city you can, or just building a small village and then having it get destroyed by a monster. This game's wild success led to a ton of direct sequels, as well as a lot of interesting sounding spin-offs like Sim Earth or even Sim Ants, and eventually led to another huge sandbox game that is, of course, The Sims. Fourth up on the list, let's take a look at one of the best arcade games to come out at this time, Final Fight. Now, Final Fight is an interesting story because it was originally planned to be a fighting game, and in fact was meant to be the original Street Fighter II. But after the wild success that beat-em-ups like Double Dragon were having, Capcom saw that, wanted to make their own money, and turned it into a side-scrolling beat-em-up, and ended up becoming one of the best. Final Fight was a huge visual upgrade from other side-scrolling beat-em-ups of the time, and was a huge technical upgrade as well, having a much more interesting combat system and playable characters that actually had important differences other than simply how they looked. It also doesn't hurt that this game had a fantastic soundtrack, great sound effects to accent it, and some of the most memorable character designs for both the player characters and the bosses. It did so well that the original game got ported and redesigned a few times on different consoles, and got 2 direct sequels as well as an eventual revival on the PS2 that, well, wasn't very good. And while we haven't gotten a new Final Fight in quite some time, the characters still live on by making appearances in various Capcom crossover fighters or even in their main Street Fighter series. Now, last up on the list is one of the most well-known games ever made, with one of the most well-known main themes ever made, and that's Tetris. Now, some of you might be thinking, hold on, Tetris has been around a whole lot longer than 1989, which is true. It was available on home computers and even on home consoles like the NES. But the version of Tetris that really spread like wildfire and is the most well-known version is the Game Boy version. And really, Tetris is the game that made the Game Boy sell as well as it did. This is the puzzle game that everyone knew, everyone fell in love with, and inspired the entire genre of competitive puzzle games. Not to mention, as a case study, this game really proves how mobile gaming really benefits from games that are easy to pick up, play, and put down at any moment you want, rather than something that involves sweeping large levels. Now, for those of you that are a little salty that Tetris is on this list when it didn't really originally come out in 1989, well, good news for you, there's a bonus game. The fact is, Sega hasn't been getting a lot of love on these lists, mainly because Nintendo was kicking their butt really hard the past couple of years, but there's one title that came out this year for the Genesis that's close to my heart and I just can't leave off the list, and that's Golden Axe. Now, Golden Axe was another side-scrolling beat-em-up that came out this year, but whereas most of those games were focused on street brawls or something in an urban setting, this game took it full-blown swords and sorcery, giving you heroes that were wielding swords and axes and using powerful magic to blow their enemies up. Sure, Final Fight had more technical fighting and was a better-looking game, but Golden Axe let you ride a freaking fire-breathing lizard to attack your enemies with. What this game lacked in polish, it more than made up with style, and really, we have it to thank for the existence of future fantasy-style side-scrolling beat-em-ups that started incorporating RPG elements as time went on. This may not have been the iconic Sega Genesis game, which we wouldn't get for a couple more years in '91 when Sonic the Hedgehog comes out, but it was the first really huge title that made the system feel like a must-buy. So those are the best games of 1989. As always, there were a whole lot more incredible games that came out that just didn't make the list, so if you've got a favorite that I didn't talk about, make sure to let me know down in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button to let me know, as well as subscribe, and I will see you guys later.